Owain Yeoman and Tim Kang aren't real cops, but they're
TV police!
the TV police.
Dano Beerbauer! Oh,
What's up, guys?
All right. What's up,
Oh,
man?
man. Look at
I
you
miss you.
resplendent in your Laura Ashley shirt. Has it been a difficult 15 or 20 years? I'm assuming you've just probably sat in your bedroom sobbing for the past decade or so.
I think about you guys a lot. Like, I mean, this has been my
This is a
my
family
lock
show, Dano.
screen.
Yeah.
That's been my lock screen for like
Hey, love it.
for like 12 years. That's been my lock screen on my phone.
I love it.
I think when was that? I saw you at Soho House in New York. Was that the last time we hung out? Owen?
Probably. Oh, my goodness. When was that? Like, I want to say that was a good 5 or 6 years ago now.
maybe
1983. Yeah. I was
And
about
then
6 at the
When
time.
Owen was 7.
Yeah. Tim, did you come on to Too Old to Die Young? Was that when I saw you? I saw you randomly on something. You were wearing a suit, playing a grumpy cop.
Oh, Mentalist? Was it the Mentalist?
That might have been.
Yeah, you might have
no,
put
it
me
was
on- yeah.
something else. You day played on something else, and I ran into you. It's so weird. You're so
As a
good at this
grumpy
character.
deadpan cop?
Yeah,
I can't believe that for a second.
He had a brown suit on, if I recall.
Oh, that's definitely the Mentalist. If it was a brown suit, you saw me on the Mentalist. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
That was a
I
good
love
show.
we might
all
spend
right.
a bit of time talking about it today. He texted me that he'd watched the episode 3 times, which is the first 3 times he's ever watched The Mentalist.
That actually is my lone episode that I've seen of The Mentalist, and it was excellent.
Thank you. And I feel like, several years after the fact, it's good to have your endorsement. But I have to preface this by saying that Dano definitely was one of my favorite on-set presences during The Mentalist.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit, Dano, about your journey to The Mentalist and what exactly you did, because to this day, I still have no idea what you did. In fact, I'm wondering whether you just walked in off the street and, or won a competition or something.
I was in Hawaii, and I got a phone call for an opportunity to come to LA on like a Wednesday. And I wanted to join the DGA really bad. I wanted to be an AD. You can't really do it in Hawaii because then you can only work in Hawaii, weird DGA rules. So I got an opportunity, flew to LA in like 2 days, essentially moved there. And then the opportunity didn't work out. So I was kind of scrambling. And then through a friend of a friend, I got an interview with Sarah Prisabella, who you've had on the podcast. She's
As a guest,
incredible.
I love Sarah.
And then her partner in crime, Barbara. Do you remember Barbara?
I do, yeah.
A lovely lady. So we had a lunch interview in Beverly Hills. And I don't think they liked me at first.
I can't believe that. How did that lunch meeting
How
go?
could they not?
It was weird because I didn't know what I was doing at all. In Hawaii, I had worked on a few different projects. I didn't have a film background. And I was like a prop guy, and then I did a stint as a PA in the office and like a couple random other little things. So then I got the opportunity to interview with them. Oddly enough, they gave me a phone call and they were like, hey, you should come and we'll test you out. So I was like, oh, all right, this is great. I'm all jazzed. I roll up to Warner Brothers my first day. I'm blown away. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. I'm on a studio set because the ones in
Kind of like how we all were when we rolled up that first day,
Tim, that was kind of like when you rolled up every day on Mentalist. You were just like in awe of how awesome
it never
everything
changed.
was.
Yeah.
So
Season 6, I was still like, oh my God.
Yeah, it was great. So then all of these strange occurrences started happening. The weirdest thing that kind of locked me in and got me, I think, to stay on the show, besides Sarah, because she was my direct boss and she was rad, loved working for her. I reunited the creator of the show with his dead roommate writing partner that he thought was dead, but he's not. He's
now
not
you told
dead.
me this story. You told me this story,
That's
but
right.
I
Yeah.
thought, oh, it's just the.
Yeah.
I just
What
put it
is
down
this?
to Dano.
I
But
haven't
this is
heard
a
yet.
real. This is a real story about Bruno Heller.
I'm from the East Coast, from New Jersey. I had told people back home I was working on this show called The Mentalist. One of my friends was like, I think my dad's friend wrote that show. I didn't really know any of the rules, like on set, things you weren't supposed to do. So I
we
just
noticed.
left. Yeah. So I just left set and went to the production office and went into Bruno Heller's office and was like,
He just
hey,
walked in, sat down.
yeah,
and
I
behind his
didn't
desk.
I didn't know you were supposed to schedule a meeting or anything. Sat on his
I don't
desk.
think I took one meeting in Bruno's office. In
I had a
the,
few.
In the
I had a
6.5
few.
years.
If you want me to introduce you, to
Please,
him.
nice.
if you could, that would
Yeah.
be great. If you could hook some favors up, that would be awesome.
So I went in and I was like, hey, this is gonna sound super crazy, and I know you don't know who I am, because I've been here for like 2 days. I think I know somebody that knows you. And he was like, what are you talking about? So I said,
And who are you?
yeah, oh, totally. Yeah. I said, yeah, your roommate from college. So then he got like a little annoyed and was like, yeah, sorry, my roommate's dead. And I was like, oh, I don't think he's dead. It's I was like, I'm pretty sure it's my friend's dad. And he has a very, very strange name, the roommate / writing partner. So when I said his name, he was like, wait, what? So I said, yeah, do you want his phone number? So I gave the guy the phone number and reunited these long lost college roommate writing partners from back in the day. And he was pretty excited about that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That explains a lot, because when you told me that you had on-set immunity, having reunited Bruno with his dead college roommate, I was like, I'm going to chalk that one up to another Dano, I think. Yeah. So you managed to find a way of getting onto the set, and then came up with a great story to be able to ensnare the creator and ensure that you were able to stay on. Yeah. Give the listeners and the viewers at home just a quick overview as to sort of what your intended duties were and how far on a daily basis you diverted from that.
Okay, so I was supposed to be a set production assistant. My duties were basically in the morning, I would come in, we would go over the day with Sarah, and then I would usually go to wardrobe, hair and makeup trailer and start getting the background ready and the stand-ins, and then go over what they're going to do for the day. And then, just wait for everything to get set up. And then when we started shooting, we would work with the AD team in order to figure out like where to set the background, what the shots were. And then we basically would just direct all the people that didn't talk.
Right.
That was kind of our job. And then Tim would scream at us to get coffee and say, I will hit you if you don't, and things like that.
Well, a few of those times you had it coming, man. So
yeah, I did.
You got to act right.
I think The Mentalist was just this incredible thing, because everything after The Mentalist was nothing like that. And I don't know if there was some sort of shift in the industry or what it was.
So the other thing we have to mention is that Dano is also a very accomplished photographer, and you have a wonderful Instagram of work, which is, and I will say this, that part of your irreverent appeal was that I think you just didn't care for the boundaries that were supposed to be there, and as a result of that, I think you made yourself quite a beloved on-set presence. Would I be right in saying that you didn't watch the show for the entirety of the time that you were there?
I mean, I was pretty tight with the creator, so
yeah.
He never spoke to me after that day. Like, he saw me on set. He was like, hey, thanks, like once. Yeah, I never really watched anything. It just becomes such a part of your world that you just want to get away from it. You're not really watching television when you get home. So yeah, I had never seen an episode of The Mentalist until you emailed me.
And you never felt that was a disadvantage being on the show? Like, I guess if the main job was to wrangle the background actors, right?
Yeah.
And to make sure that they did you ever feel like I should probably know what this show is about?
It's funny because when it comes to my actual operating of the job, I take a lot of pride in being very good at my job.
And you are.
Thanks, man. So I would read every word of every script, and then in the morning I would read front to back the sides, which, for those who don't know, it's the portion of the script that you're shooting that day. I would read that as soon as I got to set in the morning. So I knew to a T what was going on for the whole episode. Because I wanted to be good at my job.
Yeah.
And that said, I still wanted to make it fun. And I didn't really know any of the rules, which helped. So it was nice. I mean, since then, obviously, I've probably worked since Mentalist. I probably worked on 100 different projects. But yeah, that was like, little baby me in there.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I think, we look back now and I think part of the fun and the familial relationship and the chemistry that was all there was born in the main part by the fact that this was a very, very early developmental bonding. Exactly. I mean, like, I think that Simon and Robin probably, certainly from the cast side, were the only ones with recognized, visible credits to that point. We were all very, very green and very, very new. And having writers on now, having Sarah on in the ADs, we've realized that The Mentalist was such a starting place for a lot of people, and I think that working on all those projects since, how did the show vary in terms of what was that special sauce? Have you done a lot of TV post Mentalist? Do you have something where you'd be like, oh, I can easily compare it to this?
I mean, you did say that, ever since The Mentalist, and you just went into, I've worked on hundreds of other things since then.
Yeah.
But you started the talk by saying haven't experienced anything like The Mentalist since.
Nothing like it.
Why? What is that?
It was great. We were just all friends.
Yeah.
And obviously you become close with with the people you work on every set, because you're around them so much, like through proximity. You become close because you have to rely on these people for various things. But The Mentalist was different. It was, we all hung out. We all, like, set was kind of just like a crazy, party. I mean, we worked hard. We made a TV show, but every second there was off times. It was just fun and cool. And yeah, there was nothing really like that post.
Since.
Yeah. I
Why
mean,
do you
there's
think
definitely
that
been
is?
some
What
great
was it?
sets. There's definitely been great
Right.
projects.
What was it, though?
It's hard to pinpoint. I think we were more relaxed because we knew we weren't going to get in trouble for every single little thing. So we kind of took those freedoms and went a more fun, creative route and just made a cool TV show. And that's kind of all we were worried about.
We've talked a lot to people about, how the special sauce of a certain group of people and the chemistry of a certain group of people. I think one of the major reasons why the show became a success was, to your point, we had a lot of fun doing it. And we enjoyed the people who were there. And that sounds like such a simple thing, but that's not always the case. Totally. And I think we came in, there were a great bunch of people in front of the camera, a great bunch of people behind the camera. And like you say, we were all united in just trying to make the best version of this show. I feel like this would be a good opportunity to bring Gigi in, who's standing with me, my dear wife, who's very excited to tell her Dano.
This isn't fair. She's so much prettier than all of us, but
We're gonna share an earphone?
We're going to share an earphone like back in the day.
What's up, Gigi?
Hi,
How are you,
guys.
lady?
I've never been in a podcast before. Look at this.
I know.
Good to see you.
It's great to see you too. How's everything? How are the little cherubs?
Great. And everything's amazing. He said you were coming on. I was so excited because I wanted to tell my Dano story. So when I first met Owen, we were like early dating. And the first time he ever took me to set, I'd never been to set before. I was super nervous. Like, I wanted to make a good impression. And I go to the Warner Brothers lot. So I show up and I'm like, oh my God, this is
Stage 9.
Huge. I was
Or
like,
stage 14. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, across the street.
I was like, this is huge. Look at all these people. Like, it's such a production. I've never seen it before. So I was like, oh, wow, this is so impressive. Super nervous. Then they call him on set. We come in. It's this huge stage, like sound stage, and there's like 300 people. And then Owen walks up. He's like, all right, I'll be right back. He goes in. You guys are all on stage. And then Dano comes up next to me, and he's like, what's up? I'm Dano. I'm like, oh, nice to meet you. Like, hey, I'm Owen's girlfriend. And I'm standing there, and like they're all like, all right, quiet on set. And the whole place goes quiet. Like you could hear a pin drop. And then Dano drops a piece of metal something on the floor, and the whole crowd, all like 300 people, turn around, and you point right at me.
So
Right at me. And I'm like, oh my God, no, it was no, hello. And then everyone goes back to like
I wasn't getting in trouble.
Everyone goes back to doing their thing, and you go, all right, nice to meet you, and you leave. I'm like, what just happened?
Wow. That is
Which I feel like is a
hilarious.
wonderful metaphor for how you operated on set, Dano. It was just chaos that almost always gave way to laughter, but all in the spirit of getting things done. And, you know, if my wife was the collateral damage on that day.
The bus, throwing our guest
exactly
under the bus.
Yeah. I mean, you weren't there all the time. Like, who cares?
No, you might as well use me.
Yeah.
I totally get it.
A lot of it was just for my own entertainment. Like, I probably did that just to make myself laugh.
Like, you 100% did. But that's why everyone loves you. You're the best.
Well, and I will say this, that in the 15 episodes that we've done to date, Dano, Gigi's never asked to be part of anyone else's
just Dano.
podcast. So this is the first
so
time she actually
real.
requested
This is the first time in my life.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Take care. See you later.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I got along well with Simon is, you know, he was pretty big at that time. You know, he had a big salary on that show. And I didn't know any better. So I just treated him like everybody else. And at first he was like, what are you doing? And then it kind of just like happened. And, you know, I've kind of kept that same mentality throughout.
Let's contextualize this a bit. Is there an expectation to behave a certain way? Like, we get the flip side of it, obviously, as actors. So, you know, no one really debriefs you. And I think it would be fair to say that in the main, we were a pretty agreeable bunch to work with. I don't think there were too many unpleasant types on our set, fortunately. But I think, you know, can there be a sort of an expectation to be standoffish? Where does that line get placed? And are you sort of briefed in that as an AD?
Oh, for sure. There's definitely those actors out there that you just kind of, you know, stay away from and don't talk to. And even if you try to be cool with them, they're still...
I feel like we should talk about the show a little bit. Given that we're here and given The Mentalist, episode 16, Bloodshot, season 1.
Yes.
And given that you went to the trouble of watching it, I think it's only fair that we give it a good college try. Tim, would you like to kick us off with a quick summary of Bloodshot?
Yeah, sure. Season 1, episode 16, Bloodshot, writer Gary Glassberg, directed by Chris Long. A car bomb in the CBI parking lot kills a prominent stockbroker, James Medina, and leaves Jane temporarily blind. The CBI team investigates Medina's old clients in search of suspects and finds that there are links also to Jane's past.
The thing that I really noticed about this episode was, I mean, first of all, written by the dear Gary Glassberg, who sadly passed away. Gary was a wonderful writer, also someone who I felt especially fond of, and I think that this episode is a great tribute to that. He wrote very, very heavily for the Rigsby and Van Pelt storyline, so I always appreciated that. And obviously when you have the powerhouse of Gary and then obviously one of our big executive producers, Chris Long, directing, it makes for a really, really fun one. I thought this was an interesting episode because it started off with quite literally quite a bang. And, you know, the bomb, I thought, was we've talked about this in episodes past, you know, the tendency to, when you have a stunt, to allow the stunt people to really have at it, because there's nothing a stunt person likes more and a stunt coordinator likes more than a big explosion. And so then the opportunity becomes, well, how can we supersize that? And the opening explosion for this was so astronomical. And I had a few kind of, you know, logic query points, like the fact that he waited for the countdown to get to about 3 before he ran away.
Yeah.
And then decide, you know, that to me was problem number 1. But there was definitely a really
that just pissed you off, huh, Dano?
Right.
You were
I was
find this.
yelling at my television.
How weird was it for you watching the show, having been, you know, on the show for a long time, knowing us? Was there any sort of disconnect? Was the show exactly what you expected it to be? Like, talk us through that. As a first-time viewer, I would love to know how it differs from just reading it on the page.
I always found shooting to just be almost like watching an episode, because you were just so ingrained in it that, and you saw the same things over and over and over again. Yes, we don't shoot in order, but you can piece it together because you do, you know, the script that well. So it felt just like being there, and it was, to be fair, it was really nostalgic and fun to watch it. And it brought back like so many memories and all this cool stuff. And because that show was such a huge part of our lives, even outside of work. I mean, I was on the Mentalist softball team, and, you know, and like, just, we used to hang out with other people. Yeah, it was just super fun. But yeah, it felt like just being back at Warner Brothers, you know, stage 9, getting yelled at by Sarah for doing stupid stuff. I loved her. Like, she is such a hard ass on set because she's so good at her job.
Good at what she does.
But I loved her. I loved how she operates. Like, she always has a spot right here. She's a great woman.
I feel like you kind of really encapsulated something there, Dano, which is that, you know, everyone brought a different energy to the show, you know, and yet in bringing their different energy, they all excelled. You were fantastic at your job, and you brought this very fun, irreverent, on the surface of it, you know, I don't care. But the truth is, I knew you were invested. I could see that you were really good at what you did, and that you cared really deeply.
For sure.
Sarah, the same. You know, it's funny. I remember talking to Tim after the fact and saying, like, I remembered Sarah being such a taskmaster, but that role it demands that, because if she wasn't making sure the whip was cracked and you were there at a certain time, the wheels fall off, you know? So I think that to her credit and to your credit, everyone bringing their own sort of special sauce. For me, I was very glad to always see you, because you were a great de-stressor. You made me laugh very, very hard, like, you know, and they were long days.
I plan on hopping back on set at some point, and I know I'm going to be a completely different person.
You know, The Mentalist is over, right? You won't be hopping back on that set. You're planning to hop season 26. Yeah. Guys, I'm back.
I'm here for Mentalist too.
Stage 9 has been completely dismantled.
Speaking of Sarah, the one time I thought I was going to get fired, I wanted to be so good at my job as to try to make myself indispensable, so all of the crap I pulled, I could get away with. This one time we were shooting this, it must have been a couple of episodes in a row, and it was hell on earth, stage 9, single room interrogation shooting, where basically everybody just stands around and does nothing for 12 hours a day, because you're just, you know, same lighting steps, like, you know those days where you're always in the same room. So me and some of the other PAs, we found that all of the sets that were built had this area in the middle where if we moved one of the walls, you could close that wall up, and you were in the middle of all the sets, and they were just surrounding you, so no one could know see you, that you were in there. Yeah, we set up like this little hangout. We stole chairs from like one of the other sets and moved them in there. We had like Crafty set up in there, and we were just hanging out all day in this like little like clubhouse we made. And I guess, you know, when you tell those jokes and you just can't stop laughing? I vividly remember that happening, and somebody just couldn't stop laughing, and all of a sudden you just hear like, "Roar," and the wall moves, and it's Sarah, just beat red.
Oh no.
And it wasn't like, oh, I caught you. It was like, we were in a living room that we had built, on set.
Couches, lazy
like
boy,
all just hanging out, like eating, and
TV
she
setup.
lost her mind. She was like,
You got a
"Get
hot-
back to the AD trailer." We all just like lined up outside the AD trailer. Like
How many of you were in there?
Like 4.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh my! I have
So
no
yeah,
idea.
that
I
was
had no idea this.
That was I've done that on multiple sets. We yeah, that was the closest. I think that was the maddest I've seen her.
I can barely dare venture to ask, but did you prepare a one-word remembrance for this episode?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you kick us off?
My one-word remembrance is hair gel.
Hair gel. Nice. Love that.
I feel like I know where that might be going, but sure. Yeah.
It was quite a distraction for me throughout the entire episode.
I agree with you, by the way, and I'm gonna I'll weigh in on that. What's yours, Tim?
Yeah, and mine is
Wobble.
wobble.
Oh.
Right.
I think
Now
I might
mine-
know what you're talking about.
Superpowers.
Superpowers.
Or just powers. Yeah, those are my words. Or word. We all managed to keep it to one word. No secondary word today, Tim?
No, not today.
I love that.
Yeah, I did it.
So talk us through hair gel.
So, I mean, I think I kept losing the plot of the episode because I was staring at your spiked coif so intensely the entire. I was like, "Is he?" I thought you were like the lead singer of Sum 41. For a couple
Yeah,
of
there
minutes.
was definitely
that was the hair you talked about, Owen.
there was
recently.
an early Duran Duran type vibe going on, and I actually mentioned this to Tim a couple episodes ago. I was definitely going through an experimental hair phase at that point. It was 2008, guys. You know, I didn't know any better at the time. I remember thinking, if I just apply more hair gel, it will keep getting better. But
if
there
it
was a
gets
heavy amount of
spikier.
there was there was a heavy amount of hair gel going on in that episode.
Oh man,
My episode were my word superpowers was more because, you know, I think up until now we've seen Jane as being this sort of, or he's being established as being this almost superhuman character. And we talked about the challenge of, certainly in latter day TV heroes, not building up a character to be so impervious that he's no longer relatable. And so I think the ability to take away someone's power, in this case his vision, is such a big part of what he does, because, you know, the mentalist thing, we joke that the mentalism is quite often starts with him walking around a room, and I joke that Patrick Jane would be screwed if he didn't have a living room full of family photos to sift through, because that's usually the MO. He would go in, he'd be like, let me just, you know, and you realize that all of these things do come from a very subtle ability to just pick up on the clues that are there. I can tell you're married because I can see a picture of you at your wedding. You know, all of those things being stripped away and suddenly now having to rely just purely on the psychological, that was really, really interesting to me. Also seeing how, you know, there's a superpower in denial. And I think what we have here in this episode with Rigsby and Van Pelt is the denial of feelings. And so for me, this was the first time that you actually saw that being stripped away and Rigsby and Van Pelt being honest with each other about their feelings. And so it was really, really fun for me to go right back to the start of that storyline and explore that and see what that was like with Amanda. Because it made me realize just how long we kept that relationship bubbling for. And we've talked about that, you know, the challenges of it, but I don't know if you would be able to keep the will they, won't they back and forth going these days over 5+ seasons, 23 episodes per season.
I think the attention spans of people are just too short these days. They want that instant gratification of show me from beginning to end in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't think people are willing enough to become invested. You know, I think that's why a lot of the episodics are just standalone episodes these days. You know, and they don't, I mean, they'll touch maybe in the first few minutes of a few things from the last episode, but, you know, then they'll go on to a completely different storyline. And I think that's just to hold viewer attention.
We've asked everyone, what do you think Mentalist 2025 would look like if the show came back?
Squid Games, most likely. It's like a Like a weird Squid Games where Simon wins. You know how it was very almost jazzy with the music and the low talking, the Jane monotone, the Cho monotone, however it is you act, Owen. And I think that might need to be spiced up a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think people would be receptive of those characters these days, but you could probably get away with a similar show format because you have all those like Chicago shows that are similar, or you could just get artsy with it, have like Nicholas Winding Refn direct an episode or something like that, and just get crazy.
Yeah.
What
I
do you
think that
think
would
it is
work.
about? What do you think it is about procedurals, about the holy trinity of medicine, courtrooms, and cops? Right?
I think it's for the same reason that, people wake up and they have the same breakfast every day, drink coffee every day. By the end of the episode, you're going to be satisfied. There's not going to be this cliffhanger. I just think it was a comfortable place to be for people. We always knew it was doing well because they would come to set and tell us, somebody would come from the office and be like, hey guys, this week hit, 5 point whatever the numbers might have been. So we knew what was going on. They were pretty transparent with that. I always found the relationship between crew and actors to be strange. That whole thing where, they kept everything from the actors, and it was like, you were part of the crew just like everybody else. I don't know why, you weren't brought in more to find things
Right.
out, or instead of every single person from the crew being like, oh my God, somebody not tell him not to spike his hair. Like nobody told
Well, I think,
you.
look, a part of it, I think, is that, the mercurial nature of, let's say, quote unquote, most actors, it's
Sure.
like
Yeah.
they can't trust us, production can't. We're not
Yeah.
grown up to them, generally
Yeah.
speaking, right? I remember sitting in a trailer one time, and this was on a different show. It was when I first started.
Mhm.
One of the PAs took me from my trailer, and I said, I got to go use the bathroom. She walked me to the bathroom, waited in front of the bathroom, then walked me to the set, then waited out for me, then walked me back to my trailer, and did that all week long and I'm like, I know where the bathroom is. I know where set is. I don't need
It's
you
so crazy.
to hold my hand. But because they don't trust actors, we're going to go off and wander away and not go to set.
Not so much a summary. These are my 3 bullet points of things
Love
that
it.
I kind of enjoyed.
Yes.
Now, is that, and this is directed at Owen, was that the first time on screen you've ever been referred to as Butch? Because I've always thought it. I just have never seen it written.
It took someone else from the nightclub Hype to be able to point that out. It's like,
I mean, Hype got crazy back in the day.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I actually quite like that line. You're gonna have to lose the backing dancer to Butch. That might be one of the that might be one of the first network
References. Yeah.
references to my butchness. Yeah.
Okay, my next one was that's definitely not the first time one of Amanda's boyfriends has been found to be a killer.
Well, let's talk about that. Like Van Pelt's terrible
Speak into
taste
that.
in men.
I was just talking about real life.
Right.
I was
Dan Hollenbach. Like sometimes a character gets so important so quickly that there's an immediate stink on it. You know what I mean?
It went from 0 to 100 with that guy.
Right? It was like, it's Dan Hollenbach. Dan who? We've never seen Dan Hollenbach before.
Yeah.
And then suddenly he was everywhere.
Yeah.
I thought it was a nice clap back to the previous episode, because wasn't it the previous episode that I had gone off for a drink with one of the country club women, Tim? I feel like it was, right?
Yes.
And so, I guess all is fair. I was off with my middle-aged cougar.
So she was allowed to
she dipped into a little Dan Hollenbach,
Yeah. I think my next point was when you were in the bathroom and you went all creepy uncle on Dan Hollenbach.
Yes.
And you were like, sorry to get heavy with you for a second there. And then you turn around and this 125-pound dude works you over.
I did notice that. I did notice that. And I think we'd had a conversation
You're
about
like
that at the
twice
time.
his size.
Even Dan Hollenbeck said to me, he was like, how am I supposed to get the better of you? It's like you are literally towering over me. But in
what
fairness,
are you, like 6'3"?
6'4",
6'4"?
you know, in the right light.
Yeah.
with a head. Yeah, with a headwind. Now I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. Like, I
We're
mean,
talking about you getting beat up by somebody much weaker.
thank you. And the only way it was plausible, and I think we actually worked this out on the day, was that if I turned my back to him, because then I do believe he laid into me with a gun. Right? It wasn't just. I wasn't getting punched. He took the gun and gave me a good, you know. But you're right. I mean, what is it with Van Pelt? And I thought the line actually was great, where he said, "Oh, Idaho, famous potatoes," and she was like, "No, it's Iowa."
That was amazing.
Guess what's Iowa famous for?
I loved it. Gullible women. That was really funny.
That was a great line. That with bad taste in men. I remember watching the scene where Simon touches Lisbon's face. And actually, you know, there's a moment where I come up and Rigsby's sort of embarrassed and then excuses himself. But it was, for me, one of the really early acknowledgers of there being more than just a work relationship there, you know, and they were building that from day one. And it's interesting because Bruno apparently never wanted to go down the path of Lisbon and Jane together. This has been chaotic, you know, just all over the map. Everything I knew it would be. And I love you for it. Thank you so.
If you need like another host for the show, I can be in like a smaller box in the corner.
I mean, we might do a picture in picture.
Here. You can give it, I can just be in one of your eyes.
Absolutely.
Pirate Dan, this has been, well, I'm trying to think of the word. Tim, what has it been?
Phenomenal.
Phenomenal. That would be
amazing.
Up there.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
Bearded.
Yeah. All of the above.
Yeah.
We love you. Thank you for joining us.
This has been real. Thank you so much. Really appreciate both of you. Miss you both.
Appreciate you. Miss you, man.
Can't wait to chat with you guys soon. Talk to you.
Yeah.
Back in the studio. So we want to say a big thank you to Dano, who is just mellifluous in every way.
Yes.
And we were pushing up against time. Tim had a hard out. So we wanted to revisit our analysis of the episode, and sad that Dano obviously can't be here to continue that, but we would like to thank him so much for being an awesome guest. So diving straight back into episode 16, Bloodshot. And this was a really, really strong episode, I thought, and interesting because I thought it was the first episode that was overtly critical of Jane. What do you think about that hot take? Because I tell you why. I was reading some comments the other day, and there was a really interesting take, and one of the fans had written, rewatching The Mentalist now for the fourth or fifth time, and I'm finding it harder and harder with each rewatch to be sympathetic to Jane. And I thought that was a really hot take and an interesting one that I wanted to discuss with you, because this episode engages with that. The charlatan version of Jane plays pretty fast and loose with people's lives. And for the first time, we're really seeing that outside of just the triviality of, hey, team, come do this. It might be a bit risky. We're actually seeing the real life ramifications. What's your take on that?
When you watch an episode is different than I may onboard an episode. And so for me, the episode itself, I was confused by it on some levels. And the way that characters were portrayed were different in this episode than they have been in the previous, let's say, 3 or 4 episodes. We're creating this sort of momentum, and it all feels like it's slotting in. And then this episode comes. Now, I'm not sure if it was a performance issue or if it was a writing issue. And I'm going to most likely go with the latter on that, how Jane is coming across. I think that could be a symptom of what I'm talking about. Let me dive in real quick on my word. And to remind everyone, my word was
wobble.
Okay. And what I meant by wobble is the episode felt a little off to me in some ways. Yeah.
Interesting.
To go back and address what the fan had said about Jane, I agreed with that. In fact, I wrote down on the notes here, Jane is more testy, touchy at the doctor, a bit mean.
Yep.
And that ease with which Patrick Jane floats through life is gone now. Now, given he's blind,
sure,
that's a huge life-changing thing. But
he says it, doesn't he? He said, "Oh, it's the blindness. It's making me mean."
And he says as much, correct? But to me, it was a facet that we hadn't seen, and so it was a little bit jarring. And even if he did say it, it was jarring, and it felt out of place.
Going back to our love of Shakespeare, there was something sort of Shakespearean or very what I would call tragedy sort of motif about this. That I'm thinking Oedipus, I'm thinking King Lear. The blindness as a form of introspection. When you can't see out, you have to see in. And I think that what was interesting for me, just to sort of put a finer point on exactly what you're saying. This was the first time that I felt like we'd had the opportunity to see Jane wrestling with the after effects of what he'd done. Very easy to be the guy in the nice house cashing the checks, not really thinking about the clients. In fact, there was something very callous.
You're talking about the episode now, right? You're talking about him having to deal with his past.
Specifically in that flashback, that first flashback. I'm trying to remember. Is it with Carol Gentry?
One?
Yeah, the Carol Gentry one. The lady who then subsequently commits suicide. So we've got this sort of layered. Like you got the Dan Hollenbeck, obviously. Is it Hollenbeck or Hollenbeck?
Hollenbeck.
Hollenbeck with an E. Okay. So, he lives that out in real time, obviously the after effects. But Carol Gentry was an interesting one, and there was a nice little device at the end of that flashback where you see Simon sort of saying, "Oh, time's up," gets the check, throws the water, and for me that was a very different Patrick Jane to the Jane that we know. Maybe a slightly humbled Jane, a much more contrite and obviously post-tragedy Jane.
But after he came back from the flashback, you mean? Okay, gotcha.
But also the Jane, I guess, that we meet in CBI post the murder of his family, that obviously has massive ramifications and changes a human. But when you go back and you see the pre-tragedy Jane, it's not just the suits and the slick hair. There is something faintly charlatan about him, faintly sort of unlikable, quite honestly.
Well, I don't know that it's faint at all. It is unlikable.
Right.
Yeah, it's apparent. It's obvious, right? Yeah.
That's something that I hadn't really maybe had an opportunity to fully realize. And I think for me, that's why this episode, I agree with you. I think that structurally, this episode did jump around in a bit of a sort of neck-breaking way. But thematically, I thought it was a milestone for us because this felt like the first time we were overtly critical of Jane and the first time that we introduced consequences, because I think Jane has been allowed in the CBI to live quite a consequence-free life. He's every time he faces up with authority, a joke and a hip and a hop and a skip, and he's out the door again.
And he's gone. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, my quick take on it was, maybe it was in execution. Maybe that's what it is. It's just and my word to go back to it is wobble. It felt wobbly. Is what it did.
And so your wobble word, it's not easy to say. Your wobble word is a sort of reference to the episode as a whole. Do you feel like this is
a reference to the episode as a whole? But you didn't have any problem with that, huh? You looked at it as a milestone. You didn't see any sort of wobbliness that I saw.
Yeah, I felt it was in very assured, and this is what I love about the show. This is what I love about entertainment, and I guess art in general, is that everyone has their own take on it. Yeah. So to address your point, I think it's interesting, and I think both things can coexist. I totally see where you. I think the show structurally is always a tricky one. I think you and I have had more than a few opportunities to say that when we've come to the end of an episode, we've needed to rewatch it to clarify it, because sometimes there's an awful lot going on in 45 minutes, But the truth of it is that I guess I was focused a little more on the theme and the story. But I can certainly see where you're coming from, which is, I guess, a strange thing to have to discuss because it's in the hands of very assured filmmakers. We've got Chris
That's
Long,
what I mean.
obviously our number two, who, for all intents and purposes, was our day-to-day sort of, on-set showrunner. So it couldn't be in safer hands there. And I felt like the look and feel of it was very Mentalist. And Gary Glassberg, obviously, very few people bigger than him in the procedural world. I think also I might have maybe got a bit more out of this episode in the same way that I felt a bit more of a passenger, say, in the fabulous episode that was Crimson Casanova, because that was a show moment. I did have a soft spot for this episode only because of what it allowed to unveil about the Rigsby and Van Pelt storyline. This was the first
funny
time.
enough, that part I thought was spot on. And I think, I wanted to talk about a few of the moments that you and Amanda had. I thought you guys knocked it out of the park. I don't remember this episode making this big of an impact the first time around, maybe because I didn't have a chance to really watch it. The Morality Engine episode, I remember Nina saying, we didn't know what we were going to do with this thing. Like, oh my God, what do we do?
It's calibrated for evil.
Yeah. Right. So I kind of feel, in some ways, it's not necessarily the script solid, the story solid, the storytelling solid, the camera work solid, but those pieces might not necessarily come together and fit. And that's the feeling that I got. So that's why you're getting a more of a generalized description of wobble rather than
was there something about the nature of the actual story itself? Was it a guest actor? I thought the guy who played Dan was very solid. I
thought he was great. And that's what
I enjoyed his performance.
No, I just got through saying that, right? Like everything was solid. Right. It just happens to be that all those things kind of together to me didn't gel the way it normally does, the way that it has the previous episode and the episode before that.
That's been the interesting thing, I think, about us doing this rewatch too, because for the first time now we're watching these as, to use Crystal Watanabe's sort of analogy, as an extended movie almost. Yeah. So I haven't had the opportunity to do an end-to-end rewatch of The Mentalist. So now it's becoming very apparent those episodes that feel a little different or a little structurally off or maybe just not what we have come to know as the show. And look, it was a conversation I was having this week. 23, 24 episodes of storytelling. That is an enormous undertaking. And you and I have joked about it, even doing TV Police. It's a marathon.
Yeah.
It's a marathon. And there's a reason why, aside from all the economics of it all, that, network television and streaming is now treading down the far more what I call the European BBC-style path. A season now typically is 6 to 8 episodes. If you're on network, maybe, and you're a hit, 16 to 19. And so inevitably, I feel like however good the ingredients, after a while you are going to have certain episodes that just pull ahead and feel stronger. I think it's they can't all be absolute bangers like we make every week on the TV Police. There's very few people can do that, Tim, and we're in a very, very small,
we're lucky enough to we're like rarefied air here.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. So but I totally take your point. Let's chat then, as we both touched on it, about the Van Pelt and Rigsby.
I was just going to say, let me open that up real quick. I have to say, I'll
show the love side because it seems appropriate for this conversation.
I loved the tea making scene with you, and it was so great, and it just flawlessly executed. I mean, and I even wrote this down because it was so great. It's the rule of thirds in comedy, and you nailed it. So number one was what was it? Milk first. Number two was truly boiling, and number three was tastes weird. And
tastes weird.
You taste weird, and you repeating his words was the cap. I rewound that segment like 4 or 5 times. Laughed every time. It was so flawlessly done, my friend. It was so funny. Yeah,
that's so funny.
And then
I found the meta sort of implications of that scene very funny too. We had an Australian and a Brit
Right.
both playing Americans,
Right.
both doing something very uniquely British. Making tea. And I also had slight issue with some of the recommendations, because tea obviously is a very personal thing. Now, I think if you ask any Brit, there is an etiquette to, I think, the perfect cup of tea. And it definitely does not involve the milk first. I'll tell you that right out the gate.
Right.
Because for me, and I'm not saying this is definitive, this is just me before I open up a whole can of whoop-ass and people come at me. They're like, no, milk first. But I truly believe that the perfect cup of tea, first you steep the tea. For me, the milk comes after for the very simple reason that if you're making an Earl Grey or a black tea, you need to know how much milk to add to balance the strength of it. I take the tea bag out and then I drop the milk in accordingly. And then I know the color that is... Yeah, after years of tea making, I'm like, that's a nice golden brown there. So there were so many things and I remember registering that on the day as well. I was like, is the tea boiled? I was like, oh, well, that's going to be a stinking cup of tea. And you put the milk in first.
Maybe Jane likes a terrible, terrible cup of tea.
It's possible, but he's so particular about things.
Ruined cup of tea is what he's into, you know? You don't know.
I really did have so many questions about that scene and the method. So maybe people will write in the comments below, how do you like your tea made? But I love that we own the same variable temperature kettle.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
No, you got to have it. You got to have it. It's key.
Sorry, I totally
no, not at all. And then but to conversely to Rigsby's trying to appease Jane's tea habit and trying to do him a favor. Conversely, Van Pelt is going the other direction and setting Jane straight. And I loved how Amanda calibrated that performance. She didn't come off as mean. She stood her ground, and a part of Van Pelt that we had never seen before, because up until this time, she's the very amenable, very team-oriented. What was the phrase? You got to go along to get along, right? In this episode, she set Jane straight in a very firm way that was still Van Pelt, but showed that, don't screw around. And
it touched a real nerve, and I agree with you.
I loved Rigsby confronting Dan Hollenbeck.
Oh, sure.
In the bathroom. That was a side of Rigsby and much the same way. Rigsby is a lovable teddy bear, we love watching his antics with Van Pelt, and it's very endearing. But him confronting Hollenbeck in the bathroom, again, it was serious business. It was a side of it. I was like, oh shoot, okay, wow, all right.
And I think both. Thank you. The characters, both written and the characters performed, is that everyone has a duality.
You play the heavy real good, Owen. I don't know why you don't play it more.
Well, I do play it
because I've seen you for 7 years playing the non-heavy, the lovable. You know what I mean?
It's interesting because
you're excellent at it.
Thank you for saying that. I've spent I guess the sort of the majority of my career shying away from that because it is the more obvious choice. I'm 6'4",
100%,
200 something pounds.
That's what I figured.
It's easy for me to have presence and have So what I am always interested in doing it, rather than sort of, I guess, double underlining that, is playing against type a little bit. And what I wanted to do with Rigsby, in the same way that I guess Jane wanted to steer him away from being I'm the leading man here and making him a coward, which was a far more interesting choice. Right. Your stoic sort of deadpan meeting up against what we've seen in Crimson Casanova, which is a very, very emotionally available, albeit logically guided, but really beautiful, potentially sentimental human who we just haven't seen that side to. Similarly with Van Pelt now, we're beginning to pry that open. And I wanted very consciously in Rigsby to have the sense of, yes, this is a guy who was probably a football player and probably been in a few fights, and yet doesn't lean heavy on that, because in life, I also don't do that. You know me, like most people are like, oh, you're a big guy. And I'm like, yeah, but you'll never find me asserting that. I'm quite the opposite of that.
You don't need to. Right? I mean,
Sure. And I think it makes for a far more interesting choice theatrically.
You walk in the room and it gets darker because you're blocking out the sun. So there's no reason for you, Owen, to puff out your chest or anything else. We all know you just entered the room, you know? So.
Sure. I mean, I do have I think I spent a lot of time in dugouts or especially if I was in a scene with Robin. I mean, it was... There were Rigsby apple boxes specifically for Lisbon, Lisbon and Rigsby seats, and that's why to continue the playing against type. That's why I love the fact that when we go to see Terry Andrews, is it at the Hype nightclub? It's not me who does the butch, the takedown. It's Pocket Rocket Teresa Lisbon with her, So I thought. Mr. Andrews. But I do think that those choices and those, I guess what you would call the paths less traveled, make for more interesting things. I'm always far more fascinated by a duality in a character. I was going to say one of the technical opportunities afforded by the blindness, I thought, was that we saw it used comedically when everyone scattered with the, can someone make me a tea? And I was left there. And then he was like, Rigsby, which I took sleight of hand side. I'm assuming it's because I wore a very nice,
amazing cologne.
Not that I just stank. But the Van Pelt scene was great because it allowed her that wonderful moment of introspection. And did we ever touch on what that event or what that kind of childhood upset might have been later?
No,
I'm trying to remember if we did.
I mean, we may have, and Crystal, what is it?
Sure. But this is also to your earlier points, and I think, to the point of what we were talking about, things do get picked up and put down inevitably. And I think that maybe to sort of give context to viewers at home, there are many, many cooks in these kitchens. So even the storyline as conceived by the writers, as sort of acted out by the actors, I did think about that in that moment. I was like, I can't remember a time where we revisited that, but I thought it set up something really nice, and I hope we do, and I hope I'm wrong, because it would explain quite a bit about we talked about it with Erica a little bit in the last episode, where she said the quietude of Van Pelt would be a problem today. I don't know if I agree with that. I think there are many, and in fact, someone had written as a comment underneath the episode, I actually really appreciated Van Pelt's sort of initial quietude, because you have to remember she's also the newbie, and there is a sense of, okay, let's just sit, let's just watch, let's just assimilate into the team. And I thought Amanda, to her credit, played that beautifully, because the rest of us had to honor a CBI history. We'd all been together, since the days when Rigsby had his...
I think too, maybe, we have to remember the context of how we came up versus how a 2025 mentalist would come up. And I think for what Erica could have meant...
2026 even.
Well, 2026, sorry. But when we were talking, it was still 2025. No, but what she meant was, we can't take... That slow burn can't happen that slowly. That quietude of Van Pelt needs to kind of go away a lot quicker than it did, in our show.
Right.
But not that it can't exist, but... she needs to assert herself a lot quicker in this day and age, potentially, right?
In this format, I might add, because I think there are plenty of wonderful examples of slow burns in features and in other series. But I think you're right. I did note that this episode felt a bit splashier than usual. I thought the explosion at the start felt very much it was like, we spent some good money on that. Visually splashy, but maybe less of it was like all of the concepts were there and all of the ideas were there. But I think it also got tripped up by a very, very simple thing, and that is the depiction of blindness and the acting of blindness. I think that always has the potential to wobble, to use your word. Yeah. Okay, so at the end of the spectrum, we have Scent of a Woman. Perfect way to play blindness, okay? And whatever you think about Al Pacino, amazing. Playing blind for an entire episode is not easy, because even if you are doing it very, very well, there is, and there were a few moments in this episode where I noticed that Simon sort of unwittingly knew where people were.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? And he just seemed very, and you could argue, of course, that maybe he's just become attuned and his hearing has become much better. But it did, for me, raise a few practical questions. I always marvel at when folks who are hard of vision or completely blind are using the walking sticks. Right. Because I can't, I look at that and I'm like, is that a reliable way to get around? Because I remember putting on those glasses that make you sort of completely unable to see and having a go with that. I didn't know where, it wasn't helping me at all. I could tell I was banging into stuff, but I had no sense of then how to compensate or move accordingly.
Well, I think with the stick, with the stick, the cane, I think when you're blind, the end of that stick is like an extension of your arm. That's the sensitivity. You have no sensitivity. You're holding a baseball bat. You, Owen, when you do it. When I do it, I'm holding a baseball bat. But when a blind person is holding it, I feel like it's a fine-tuned instrument so that when they touch it, they go, I'm exactly 2 feet from that thing, and they can walk around it, right? It becomes
and you've just sort of assured my point, which is that surely that kind of attuning and that fine instrumental approach, that takes a while to learn. To learn. So Jane's come out of hospital, and the next day he's a dab hand with the walking stick. I'm like, wait a second, that to me is a little bit of a stretch.
There should have been a lot more running into walls and hitting stuff. I mean, a lot more of that. Maybe
it was a cheap gag, but if we're gonna go with, and look, just as a reminder, my word was obviously powers or superpowers, but this was it was a useful device, and I feel that if, to your point, if this episode was a stumble or a wobble, it was because it felt like it had committed very, very wholeheartedly to this idea of, okay, this episode is going to be the episode where we show Jane robbed of some of his omnipotence. And I appreciated that. As a viewer, I was like, okay, how many episodes can we keep playing the beat of, okay, we'll go along with these shenanigans? And it's not like they haven't had real consequences. So for me, I guess it was a sort of a bit of a mea culpa where the writers were like, we know we've shown him be this for too long. And maybe this is our way of taking that away. As a device, I thought the blindness, whilst tricky in its presentation and maybe stumbling in its execution, it was a useful plot design in that it now showed our lead guy being forced to reckon with. There was a beautiful moment in that same scene that you were talking about with Van Pelt where Simon comes out of the remembrance, assumedly is remembering that this poor woman killed herself. And I felt like it was one of the first times where, perhaps outside of his own personal remembrance with his family, it felt like one of the first times where maybe he was reckoning with his body count. What I put in my notes was he's an emotional terrorist. He invents and justifies his guesses and the harm that they can cause. And I don't think up until, because if you think about the actual reality of being blind, it sends you inward, doesn't it? And that level of introspection, I think, is something that was probably not present at all in Patrick Jane's.
Well, I feel like I said, it wasn't the acting, it wasn't the execution, it wasn't, it was just all these things kind of coming together that just didn't jive for me. Real quick on that note, I feel like the part of that wobble as well maybe is the extremes of who Jane is because of that blindness. There's a bit of a, and maybe it's put on, and maybe it's the character putting it on, but he became a little like incorrigible back at the CBI right after the blindness. He had that police officer walk him in. He was being a bit of a dandy about everything, and oh, woe is me kind of a thing. And so in that sense, we're hitting these extremes. At the hospital, he's being this sort of mean-spirited, sort of bad mood kind of Jane. And then back at CBI in the aftermath, he's like a 5-year-old, all of a sudden. And so it's
interesting.
I think that I was like, where is this guy coming from right now? What is this? So I think that's maybe part of that wobble that I was describing.
I had a thing where I went to a doctor, and the nurse tech said, "Oh, well, let me clean your ears ahead of seeing the doctor." So she cleaned them very vigorously. And I remember at the time going, "Oh, man, that really hurts." And she was flushing them with like water. And turns out she perforated both my eardrums. So what I then had after that was 2 or 3 days.
Did it heal up at least?
Yeah, it did. And I was actually
okay.
I was actually filming the show at the time, and I was terrified because it happened on a Thursday and I was filming on the Monday. Now, anyone who's had water in the ear, there's something that makes you immediately very sensitive. Like, not aside from my balance going, I couldn't hear properly, and it gave me terrible headaches and made me feel really nauseous, and it messed with my eyes as well, which was the whole combination of all those things made me understandably very cranky and very kind of sensitive. So for me, all of that petulance that was coming in the post-accident for Jane, that actually made sense, because I was like, oh, I relate to that. I remember that feeling. There was also a touch of, I wonder how much bad luck one man can suffer. And you would be probably well within your rights to say, okay, this sucks. I've had my entire life robbed from me already by this serial killer, and now I'm blind. Come on. How much does one guy have to suffer? So for me, that there was justification there. I totally hear what you're saying, but I did find a way to justify some of that petulance, I think. For me, I think some of my objections were more technical. And to Dano's point, I think Simon enjoyed playing with that too. Oh, sorry. Didn't realize my hands were there. Just to sort of round things out on this episode, to me, I think this was an episode that favored spectacle maybe over insight. There was a lot of spectacle. We crashed more cars than I could count in that parking lot. That kind
I think we were playing with that again. I think we were kind of dabbling with, is this the kind of show we want to be?
Sure.
Is this do we want more explosions? But this is our first go at that. And
well, we're also right
for better
at that,
or worse, right?
We're right at that inflection point of the series now where we know we've got a back nine. We've been picked up for the series. There's a little bit of money. And also with that, I think you have to up the ante and you have to up the stakes. Right. Our show is, as many people have remarked already, a very cerebral show, a clever show, a show that allows you to have a little smarts and guess who done it. But at a certain point also, we do want to still keep growing our audience, and we do want to find ways to be able to make that formula not feel so formulaic. So I think some episodes do have to feel a little bigger and a little flashier and a little bit more. I loved the fact that in the Van Pelt, and I know I'm jumping back, but the Van Pelt and Rigsby thing again is just, and I think this was a perfect example of how you tease something long burn. There's that moment where they almost kiss in the bathroom after he's been terrorized.
Oh, just real quick, sorry, not to interrupt and we got to talk about it. That was Arik. Do you remember? Arik,
I was going to say, so we were, yeah. So
Arik coming in,
and I remember Arik being so excited because I can't remember if it was a role that was going to be cast or if it was just one of those things that on the day someone went, oh, it'd be cool if a janitor came in, and then like Sarah, one of our ADs, Arik was like, oh, I'll do it. And it's just a brilliant moment. Oh, sorry. Excuse me.
Good.
But I was literally about to bring that up. So if Arik is watching, hello, mate. Nice to see you. And a wonderful, I don't know if that was a screen debut, but it felt very assured. And I totally bought him as a janitor going about his business.
Talking about that moment,
for me, it was because we had obviously spent the last couple of episodes trying to divert Rigsby into his cougar phase, and I understand all of the ways that they're doing that, but it was nice that even in that moment where they've been through everything, Rigsby got beaten down, almost died, They come together and you still didn't quite get the satisfaction of the kiss that might have, because we have to stretch that out, because at that point we already know we're going season 2 and beyond, maybe. So you can't really get them together at that point. And I think that that's a very delicate balancing act, and one that I have to salute the writers on, because I think that there is tremendous pressure. And I think that to Bruno's credit, he was a wonderful and very patient showrunner who was able to meter out exactly when and at what time. And I think that that's a tremendous skill that really does make for a hit show. If you look back at any great series, the timing and the major beats in the stories that they allow them to unfold, those things are almost always on point in a show that is very memorable and very established. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that.
Next episode, are we solo, you and I, or is it going to be?
We are solo. It is Carnelian Ink.
Carnelian
Ink. It is inked by Bruno Heller.
This has, as always, been a lot of fun, and we want to thank our agent of chaos, Dano, who and hearing his story about how he reunited Bruno with his dead roommate makes so much sense now, because I was like, how does this guy keep coming back? And now I know he went straight to the top. But we love that guy.
That's how you do it. That's how you do it, everybody.
That's how you do it. This has been, as always, an absolute joy. I know I touched on it earlier and we did a little segment, but I will say as a closing piece, make sure that you go to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/The TV Police Podcast, and make sure that you sign up for memberships there, not just subscriptions, but memberships, because Tim and I are currently plotting some very exclusive members only events. So if you want the opportunity to do that, then make sure you will get given the honorary tin can badge next to your name, so everyone in the community will know that you're kind of a big deal. But do look out for that. And obviously, as I've already mentioned, TV Police merch store, tvpolice.com. Head there and rock your merch with pride to show love for obviously what is your favorite podcast, The TV Police. Mr. Tim Kang, always a pleasure. I'll see you next week, my friend.
Thanks all.